Okay, Math 1513, North Oklahoma College. This is Chapter 1.1, Example 35. We're going to talk about absolute value equations. Absolute value is not a hard concept to understand. It's just the distance a number is from zero. It's how many steps is that number from zero. So for example, if I was going to say absolute value, that's what those straight up and down lines mean. If I was going to say the absolute value of 3, and I want an answer to that, well, I think about the number line, and I think about the number 3 here. And I ask myself, how many steps is that from 0? Well, if I stand on 0, I would have to take 1, 2, 3 steps. So I say that the absolute value of 3 is 3, because the number 3 is 3 steps from 0. The thing with absolute value equations is there's 2 answers. All right, what if I wanted to think about the number -3? And I want the absolute value. I'm asking myself, how far is -3 from 0? Well, if I stand on 0, I have to take 1, 2, 3 steps to get to -3. So we say the absolute value of -3 is also 3. There are 2 numbers that are 3 steps from 0. Another way of saying this is, if I ask you the absolute value of what number, we'll call it x, what number is 3 steps from 0. So I'm saying the absolute value of x equals 3. I'm asking you, what number is 3 steps from 0? And your answer will be 2 numbers. You'll say 3 is 3 steps from 0, and I'll put a comma there to separate it. And -3 is also 3 steps from 0. All right, so to set up an absolute value equation and get both of your answers, here's your procedure. Your first condition will be x equals 7. Okay, notice that the x comes out from inside the brackets there. So x equals, and then 7 we just copy down as it's written. Your other condition, I'm going to put the word or here, is x equals -7. Now what did we do there? Well, we took the x from inside the brackets. That's no big deal. We took whatever's inside the brackets and put it on the left side of the equal sign. But this 7, we changed to -7. We changed to its opposite. Okay, so that's how we set up both of our answers. If I say the absolute value of x equals 7, well, x could be 7, just as it's written right here. X could be 7, or x could be the opposite of 7, -7. That's how you set up your 2 answers. All right, so let's go to solving this equation right here. This is an example for problem number 35. Our first situation will be x minus 8 equals 3, just as it's written. We just took the absolute value brackets off. Or x minus 8, just take the brackets off, equals the opposite of 3. The opposite of 3 is -3. And those are the 2 equations we're going to solve. So we solve. Then x could be 11, or solve this one the very same way. X could be 5. So we say x could be 11, or x could be 5. Now you should always check your answers to see if they work. So I'm going to go back to my original equation. X minus 8, the absolute value of x minus 8 equals 3. I'm going to take out the x, and I'm going to put in my answer of 11. So 11 minus 8, the absolute value of that is supposed to be equal to 3. Now remember to keep your left and right sides of your fence separate. When I solve this, absolute value of 11 minus 8, I get the absolute value of 3. And equals, and on the right side of the fence I have a 3 there. All right, what is the absolute value of 3? I'm going to move up here. Absolute value of 3 is 3. And on the other side of my fence, I had a 3 sitting there. So that's true. And we can check that. All right? Check, it works. X equals 11 works. And you would check 5 in the same manner. All right, this is an example for 39. Let's set up our two situations. Take off the brackets, 2x plus 14 is equal to 60, just as it's written. Or, take off the brackets, 2x plus 14 is equal to the opposite of 60, negative 60. All right, I went ahead and worked these out because you guys are getting good at algebra now, so you know the steps from there. I solved the one on the left and got x equals 23. Solved the one on the right and got x equals 37. I'll leave the check for you to do. So you would take out the x, put in the 23 and see if it works. Same thing with the negative 37. All right, here's an interesting problem. This is to show you how to do exercise 43. Notice that the absolute value of 4x minus 1, it doesn't really matter what's inside, but the absolute value of something is negative 17. Well, think about that. Remember, we talked about absolute value. We said the absolute value of x could be how many steps from 0. Okay, we're asking ourselves, how many steps is this number from 0? For example, the absolute value of 5 is 5 steps from 0. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7 steps from 0. The absolute value of negative whatever, 1,000, is 1,000 steps from 0. The absolute value of a positive 500 is 500 steps from 0. Notice our answers. Look at our answers and see what you notice. Our answers are all a measure of distance. And notice we don't have any negative answers because distance is always a positive number. It doesn't matter whether I took 5 steps to the left or 5 steps to the right. What I was measuring was distance. All right, so it's going to be a positive 5 no matter which way you go because you're counting how many steps you took to get to that number. So absolute value is always going to be a measure of distance, and it's always going to be a positive number. All right, so knowing what we know about absolute value equations, we know that this cannot happen. Okay, the absolute value cannot be a negative number. So what's the solution? There is no solution. And if you guys are sharp and on your toes, when I put one of these on the test, if you see the absolute value of anything, it doesn't matter what it is, the absolute value of anything turns out to be a negative number, you know that's automatically no solution. And you can save yourself a bunch of time on the test working out a problem that doesn't really need to be worked out. Now I'm going to go ahead and work it out real quick and show you what would have happened. If you didn't recognize it, I'll show you what you would have gotten. Okay, here I've worked out both options. 4x minus 1 equals negative 17, or 4x minus 1 equals, remember it's the opposite of what you see. So the opposite of negative 17 is positive 17. I worked them both out and got x equals negative 4 and x equals 9 over 2. Now that looks like a normal answer. That's why that check is so important. You need to check your answers, plug them back in, and make sure they work. So when we check, that's when we find out that our answers are not going to work. So absolute value of 4x minus 1 equals negative 17. Now what I like to tell people to do is when you're getting ready to take out an x and put in a number, put parentheses around that x. And now take that x out and put in the number you're going to try, in this case negative 4. So we have 4 minus 1 in our absolute value brackets and our equal sign negative 17. Remember to keep your left and right side separate. Now we work this out. Inside the brackets I have negative 16 minus 1 is negative 17. So I have the absolute value of negative 17 on the left. I have a positive, I have a negative 17 on the right. But when I go back to the left, I say, okay, the absolute value of negative 17, I'm saying how far is negative 17 from 0? Well, it's 17 steps from 0. I bring down my equals, and on the right side I have a negative 17, and I look at that and go, hey, 17 equals negative 17? That cannot happen. That's one of those contradictions we talked about earlier. And so after doing all that work, we come up with the same answer. No solution. All right? But it's quicker if you just recognize that absolute value cannot equal a positive number. Remember, we're measuring distance. It's going to be a, I said that wrong. Absolute value cannot equal a negative number. Absolute value measures distance, and distance is always positive. All right, here's an equation for example number 45. I'll show you how to do your homework problem number 45. Absolute value of brackets are a little tricky because normally we would treat them like parentheses and we would try to multiply this 3 times everything in the brackets, but unfortunately brackets don't work that way. We have to try a different strategy, and our strategy is to isolate the absolute value brackets. Alright, so I'm going to isolate the absolute value. So here's my fence. I'm going to try and get the absolute value of x minus 5 alone, and then we'll go from there. So it's like a two-step problem. First get the absolute value alone, and then take care of the absolute value. So we're looking up here and we have a 3 and we have a negative 16 that we have to get rid of for the absolute value to be alone. Which one do we get rid of first? The one that's further away, the negative 16. So I'll do that real quick. You guys might want to pause the video and try and solve it on your own. Alright, here's where I am so far. Now how do I get rid of that 3? Remember, anytime a number is next to a parentheses or a bracket or anything, that's multiplication. So to get rid of a times 3, I'm going to divide by 3. Alright, here's where I'm at. Absolute value of x minus 5 equals 6. And at this point, when you get the absolute value isolated, you split into your two conditions. X minus 5 could be 6, just as it's written. You just take the brackets off. Or x minus 5, take the brackets off. Whoops. X minus 5 could be equal to the opposite of 6, negative 6. And we solve both of these. You guys go ahead and solve both of these and pause. Alright, and we end up with x equals 11 or x equals negative 1. Remember, it's important to check those answers and make sure they work. I'll leave that for you. Alright, here's a hint for your homework problem number 49. It's a word problem, and everybody gets scared on word problems, but they're not that bad. If you read the problem, you'll see that there's a formula embedded in there. And the formula is F equals negative 5.5V plus 5400. Well, it helps to understand the problem if we know what F and V are. Well, when you read the problem closely, you'll see that F stands for frequency in hertz, and V stands for volume. I believe this is the problem about the bird intaking air, and the more air, the bigger volume of air that the bird takes in, the more frequency their bird call has. So identify your variables. That's your first step. The next step in solving a word problem is identifying what information they gave you already in the problem. So you go back and you read the paragraph again, and you see the words, the frequency of the sound is 550 hertz. That means they gave you your hertz. That means they gave you your F variable. Alright, so now that you know what F is, you're going to go back to your formula. You're going to take that F out. You're going to put 550 in, and you're going to solve for V. The volume is what you don't know. So the volume is what you're looking for, and I'll leave that for you to solve. Alright, and I'll give you one final hint on word problem number 51. Read the whole problem. There's usually a formula embedded in there. So find the formula. And here I found the formula. D equals the absolute value of 210 minus 50t. The next thing we want to do is identify our variables, because it makes more sense if you know what the D and the T stand for. Alright, so we read the problem again, and we see that they told us our D stands for distance, and it's measured in miles, and they told us our T is time, and it's measured in hours. Now, they're going to ask us to either find the distance or find the time. That means they gave us one of them. So we read the problem to find out which one they gave us. Alright, so we read the problem again, and we look for clues. Did they give us distance or did they give us time? And you'll see the sentence, when will Reuben be 60 miles from Barston? There's your clue. They're giving you distance. They're giving you the D. So plug 60 in for D and calculate the time. Now it's going to be two answers, alright? Because if this is Barston and he's traveling on the road through Barston, you're going to have two answers, because he's going to be on his way to Barston, and then he's going to be traveling out of Barston. So he'll be further away and approaching Barston for one answer and further away for another. So you guys take care of that one.